Hello everybody and welcome to another top 10 board gaming video. Today is all about polarizing games, that is to say games that in my experience have divided gamers into those that love it and those that hate it, with very little in between. With that, of course, you guys know that I'd love to hear from you, so please let me know what your thoughts on this are below, and of course your own personal picks, but we're going to jump right into my number 10. At number 10, I have Scythe. This game, in my opinion, is absolutely wonderful. I love it, but a few people I've met have said that it is a horrible game. They find that it's ridiculously overrated, that it doesn't make any sense, that the mechanics are muddled, and that it just doesn't work. The reason, though, that it's so low on the list is because those people have been relatively few and far between. The vast majority of people that I've personally played with have absolutely adored it, and the fact is that most of the internet loves it, but that makes it all the more polarizing because I have yet to meet anybody who really says, it's okay. But with all that, Scythe is my number 10. At number 9, I've got Dominion. This one's kind of interesting because first off, I really don't like it, and second off, the reason I don't like it is because other games have done what it does, but better. There are some people who say, well, Dominion is the classic, it's the way that it's supposed to be, and it's absolutely amazing, and there's plenty of people who still play it, plenty of people who love all of the expansions and everything, but again, I have very few interactions with people where they say that Dominion is just okay. That's honestly the only reason that it's so low on this list as far as polarization is concerned, is because there are a decent number of people who say, well, if you play it with the expansions, it's okay. If you use this specific one, it's all right. But for me personally, I don't like it. And by and large, people seem to be love it or hate it. Dominion, my number 9. At number 8, I've got Sentinels of the Multiverse. Honestly, the main reason that this one is on it is because it's a unique thing, right? It's Sentinels of the Multiverse. It's not DC, it's not Marvel, it's not Legendary, it's not the deck building game, and so it's kind of weird. People tend to think of superhero games as those major comics, but the fact is that Sentinels of the Multiverse is a good game. It's well done, the expansions are good and helpful, the digital version is done very well. Most of the people that I've met who don't like it do not like it because it's a superhero theme, but it's for new superheroes that they're not familiar with and they don't know. And so you tend to see that where a lot of people will dismiss it outright just because of the theme and the fact that it's some kind of a new IP that they have not seen before. And so with all of that, Sentinels of the Multiverse, my number 8. At number 7 is my favorite game of all time, Cosmic Encounter. This game essentially hinges on the main mechanic of negotiation, and that in general is something that people will either love or hate. Whether it's Cosmic Encounter, The Resistance, Avalon, or any number of these other games where you have to talk to other people and figure out what's going on and come to a deal, then people generally will not just be okay with them. They will either really hate it or really love it, and Cosmic Encounter is a great example of it that I have seen time and time again at my FLGS. That's why it's a little bit higher up on this list, just because I bring it every time I go. Since it is my favorite game, I always try to get a play in, but the problem is that there's a lot of people who just dismiss it outright, or they've played it once or twice and they're just like, I don't like how it works, and so that's why it's on this list and why it's my number 7. At number 6, I've got Blood Rage, the dudes on a map that had more hype than it possibly ever deserved. This is a game that I played a couple of times and frankly, I just don't get it. And the fact is that pretty much everybody I've talked to is in either one of these two camps. It's either, I don't understand why this game is so amazing, or this game is so amazing. And I just personally don't understand it. I think that mechanically it's fine. I think that it makes sense, but I just don't see that golden type of thing with it. And so that's why it's a little bit higher up on this list, because this is something that people tend to be more zealous about, and they tend to be more in your face and like, how can you not enjoy this game? It's amazing. So that's why it's a little bit higher up on this list, but regardless, Blood Rage is my number 6. At number 5, I've got Diplomacy, the original game of negotiation and simplistic dudes on a map. So the crux of this game is that it is exceedingly simple. All you do is you say where you're going to move, and if two guys come into contact with each other, they blow each other up. The fact is that this game ends up taking 7 or 8 hours because of the in-between turn negotiation that you have with all of the other players. And similarly to Cosmic Encounter, that is really the crux of the matter when it comes to how divisive this game is, but even more so just because of its sheer length. This becomes a ridiculously complex game, even though that mechanically it's exceedingly simple. It's a very basic board with very basic pieces, so there's even less to enjoy about it than with Cosmic Encounter. And because of all of that, Diplomacy is my number 5. At number 4, I have the generalized category of legacy games. Ever since things like Risk Legacy and Pandemic Legacy came onto the scene a few years ago, these have absolutely exploded in popularity, and for good reason. A lot of times these are based off of storytelling, and it becomes more like a tabletop RPG for people that you're gradually going through and figuring out new information. The problem with many of them is that you have to destroy components as you go, and a lot of gamers really do not like that. Frankly, I don't blame them. I don't like destroying components to my games, and the fact is that after it's destroyed, it means you can't replay it. You can't sell it on the secondary market. You really can't do anything with it. Once that game is played, it has been played. And it's kind of frustrating because you know the story, you can't do it again. You don't have the components, you can't do it again. If you want to play again, you have to forget it and buy a new copy. So they have been incredibly divisive for a lot of people, and because of the story nature of it, it's essentially you can't just sort of enjoy it and be okay with it, because you really have to be immersed in the entire experience. Legacy games overall, my number 4. At number 3, I have another sort of generalized category of game, which is chaotic games, represented in this case by Galaxy Trucker. What you're doing in these games is you're having to do something on the table simultaneously with all of the other players at once. And so everybody's reaching in for parts, cards, whatever it happens to be, and it can very easily make a lot of people's brains hurt. And that's the thing with this sort of mechanic of reach in and grab and do this and that, is that you either really enjoy doing that and you like being under the pressure, or you really don't enjoy it. There are certain cases where an implementation can be a deciding factor. For me personally, I like Galaxy Trucker, but there's not a lot of other chaotic games that I really enjoy. But for sure, it's something that is very, very divisive amongst the gaming community, in that you might really like it or you really won't like it. So chaotic games in general, my number 3. At number 2, I have the famous and infamous Settlers of Catan, a game that starts many players' collections. This introduces people to a lot of very famous and popular Euro-style mechanics, but at the same time, it makes some bad mechanical choices that really don't work very well for what it's trying to do, and creates some problems, especially in the end game. So what we see is a lot of people who absolutely love it, have played it for years and continue to play it, and then people who have played it once or twice and essentially move on and don't really like it after that. And that's really the experience of pretty much everybody I've seen. There are not a lot of people who say that Catan is okay. It's going to be either, yes, let's play Catan, or no, I'm never playing Catan ever again. And typically it can be traced back to 1 or 2 bad experiences, but that's beside the point. Settlers of Catan, my number 2. At number 1, I've got Betrayal at House on the Hill. In this game, it sounds wonderful on paper. You're going into a spooky house, exploring around, something happens, and you have to defeat it. The problem is that in the implementation of this, you have somebody who randomly becomes the bad guy, and then everybody else needs to do something in order to win the game. And so the problem is that it turns from a co-op game to a non-co-op game, and you have that chaotic factor, and there's a lot of stuff that people tend to not like. But again, it's something else that people also can love, because they love the idea of the surprise. What's going to happen? I don't know. How is it going to be? And then there's the people who are like, oh, this sucks. I don't want to be surprised. I just want a normal game. And so by far, this is the one that has gotten the most discussion and issues, at least at my FLGS, whenever it gets busted out. Tons of people always want to play it, but everybody else on the other side of the room is just like, no, never playing that ever again. So Betrayal on House on the Hill is my number 1. Well, everybody, that's it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video on my top 10 polarizing board games. Of course, I could have approached this a bit differently, done essentially all party games or any number of other things. There's a lot of options here. There are, of course, a ton of games that greatly polarize the gaming community, and I would love to hear what your guys' thoughts are on it. What are games that you enjoy that are really polarizing, or games that you don't enjoy that are really polarizing? What are your thoughts on the ones that I picked? Let me know any and all of your thoughts in the comments below. You guys know I love to hear from you. Of course, as always, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at all my social media pages as well as my Patreon page. On those, you'll be able to interact with myself and my channel in a whole bunch of really cool ways. But with that, thank you very much again for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.